welcome to Webinar Wednesday. If you are here to learn how to improve your donation page in time for year-end giving, you are in the right place.
I forget, there's some other character like
As always, we want to kick off with an icebreaker while we wait for everyone to join and get settled. And we're going to be talking today about our guest, Nathan, is part of Next After, which runs the NIO Summit. And their event this year is themed after the Wizard of Oz. So I want to hear from you guys, which Wizard of Oz character do you identify with the best? And I was trying to rattle these off before we went live, but I've got the lion, so I think that was a courage issue. The scarecrow, don't totally remember what his issue was. You've got the good witch, the bad witch, Dorothy. What am I missing? Flying monkeys, you've got flying monkeys. Toto. Yeah, but you guys know more than we do. So tell us where you're coming to us from, maybe the name of your organization, and which Wizard of Oz character you identify with the most. Joseph, you identify with Auntie M. That's one that I did not think of. Okay, if you're just joining, we're going to get started in about 2 minutes. The icebreaker is tell us where you're coming to us from and what Wizard of Oz character do you identify with the most. I always want to make sure that we give a shout out to FireSpring, our platform sponsor. FireSpring is our partner because they value and understand the nonprofit sector. They provide tools and resources that make fundraising effective and easier, and that includes websites, annual reports, and even messaging campaigns. They have all the tools you need to highlight your org and shine as a leader, so check them out at firespring.com. A few reminders, we are recording. I know somebody will inevitably ask in 5 minutes, but we are recording. And we will send out the video as well as any resources mentioned a little bit later today. Also, we always give away a really cool prize in every webinar, and today's is no exception. We are going to send one lucky person our gift box that goes to all of our new members. So you can see it says, are you ready to do more good? And I'm not going to show you everything that's in here, but it's full, and it's full of really cool things. My favorite happens to be these diamond studded pens. So if you want a little glam while you work, make sure you answer any polls that Nathan does. You participate.
All right.
In the
Well,
chat,
thank you so much. You're
webinar,
super gracious and kind with that intro, and I appreciate it. I will
Our
point out that I have been upgraded now from
Hill. He is
sort
one
of
of my
funny,
favorite
which was
teachers.
how Katie positioned it on LinkedIn.
He has a great sense of humor, a true nonprofit
genuinely
background,
funny, something a little bit more.
But he also
but
is
I'm happy
just,
to be sort of funny.
I mean,
that's
he
good
is
enough.
A wizard.
Here.
He is
I'm
the
go ahead
wizard
and share
in the
my
Wizard
screen.
of Oz when it comes to digital
so that you
marketing,
can see. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat as we're going here because
everything you
some
need
different
to know
questions
in
for you
those
along the
realms.
way. Thank you, Katie,
He's
for clarifying.
also
Very
part
funny.
of the team that puts on the nonprofit innovation
yeah,
summit.
I'll keep an eye on the chat. I'll have some different questions for you
along
the way. I may have you vote on a couple of different things. Do you think this version or that version is going to be the winner, or lead to more donations? You might be surprised at some of the outcomes.
So if you stick around, I think
today we're talking all about donation pages, specifically 5 ways that your donation page might be and very well could be failing your donors. But before we dive into any of the real details here, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page about what page we're talking about. So if you go to the homepage of any nonprofit organization, this example will look at just Save the Children. If you go to their website, here's where you land. This is their homepage. And for the vast majority of us, if you go to the top and to the right, you find in the navigation, you're going to find a donate button in the top right corner. And when you click on that donate button, the next page that you land on, boop, like this, is the main donation page. So there are all sorts of different types of donation pages. The main donation page, a campaign donation page, which you might use for a dedicated email appeal or during year end or a specific giving day. You might use what we call an instant donation page, which is something that follows up something like an ebook download or a course sign up or a petition offer that leads towards a new donor acquisition conversation. But today we're focusing on what we call the main donation page. There's nuances and all the other types. We're focused here. It might look something like this. This is a very long form page. You see the whole form is stacked top to bottom, not really using the horizontal width of the page to lay out all the form fields, but using a vertical approach. You see some copy at the top about why you might give. This is what we're talking about. This is where we're focused today. And before we get into any of the real details here, I want to start by looking at an experiment. And so keep your eyes peeled on the two different versions. I am going to have you vote. So get your fingers on the keyboard, be ready to vote either version A or version B. This experiment is with an organization called the Illinois Policy Institute. And they are exactly that. They're a policy institute in Illinois, trying to craft and shape legislation and things like that, specifically a lot about taxes and things. Here's what their donation page looks like. Here's version A. It looks very typical. At the very top, you've got some navigation. You've got the donate button in the corner. You see that. You've got a big hero image. It says Illinois' comeback story starts here. You've got a little bit of copy, and then you've got the form down below. This is version A. Some of the things, the ideas going into this page is it keeps the form above the fold so that you can see it when you first land on the page. If someone is motivated to give, they've come here with an intention of giving, the thought is, why don't we just make it as easy as possible for someone to see the form and donate right away? Don't put anything in their way. Version B looks a little bit different. This is what they tested. They wondered, is that the best approach, or should we actually put more copy on the page? That's essentially the experiment here. So you've still got the same navigation. You've got the hero image at the top. And then down below, you have now a good chunk of copy. It actually pushes the form way down below the fold. You've got to read quite a bit of copy to get there. I'll scroll down. The form is exactly the same. So really the only main difference here is that copy at the top. And I'll put them side by side for you. Which one do you think is going to lead to greater donations, version A or version B? And the point isn't reading the details of the copy. It's just basically copy or no copy. Which one do you think? And I see sort of a split. A few people saying A, a few people saying B. Elizabeth says, oh, I was going to read it, but they're moving too fast. Lots of A's, lots of B's, split decision here. One interesting thing to point out is that we're all fundraisers here. Like, we're all working in fundraising in some capacity or marketing in some capacity. We're trying to figure out how do we grow donations. And we can't agree on which one of these pages is going to lead to the best outcome, which reveals a problem where we as fundraisers and as marketers, as people trying to communicate with donors, have to put our ideas to the test to give our donors a voice and see what is actually going to work to lead to greater giving. Because at this point, we're just guessing based off of probably lots of different things: gut feelings, intuition, what you've seen in the past, what you might just feel looks better or not, which are never good reasons to make a decision about fundraising. Here's the result. Are you ready? Version B, pushing the form down below the fold, but adding a whole bunch of copy about why someone should give, actually led to a 150% increase in donations. If you chose B, congratulations, give yourself a round of applause. If you chose A, I wouldn't feel too bad, because again, we don't know. In some cases, we're just working on gut feelings and intuition most of the time to try to figure out what works. But it's only when we give our donors a voice through testing that we can really decode what actually works to lead to greater giving. Now, you might be looking at the result of this and be pretty surprised, like, how is it possible that you can even improve donations by that much on a main donation page? And there's this tension that happens on one of these pages where most people coming to your main donation page have some level of intentionality around giving. Something has prompted them, typically organically, to go type in the name of your organization into Google, or to go to your URL directly and ultimately land on your main donation page. They have a mission in mind, what they're trying to accomplish. Maybe it's to give, maybe it's simply to just find out more about giving. And so this is positive momentum. But at the same time, donors or potential donors are always trying to kind of keep everything in check, find the reasons why they might turn back. What are the reasons that I really should not give to you today? There's this kind of tug of war happening between a motivation to give, but also anxiety and concern and maybe friction in the process that could keep me from actually saying yes. And so there's this tension. And why the treatment won in this case is it understood that donors coming to this page were not yet fully motivated to give. In fact, no donor is fully motivated to give until they have actually given, or at least we can't assume they are. We need copy that articulates why someone might give all throughout the giving experience. We can't assume that someone is already motivated to give. How are we doing? as an industry, as nonprofits, as fundraisers trying to move someone into a donor relationship. Here's the latest benchmarks from M&R. They publish some great benchmarks every year around fundraising and online fundraising specifically. And looking back at last year, we're actually getting worse. I used to have on the slide, visitors were converting at 22%. 22% of people coming to your main donation page on average were completing a gift. We're now down to 17%. So it got worse year over year for whatever reason. But only 17% of donors are actually giving when they land on the main donation page. And that varies from vertical to vertical, but it's kind of the overall benchmark. And the question is why? And I think to help understand and unpack the why, it's important to look at the process. And typically we look at the process of giving through the lens of a sales funnel, a customer funnel, or a donor funnel. And let's unpack it, because it's a clear analogy and sometimes a helpful analogy to look at the process through. You've got people that at the very top of the funnel, coming into your funnel like this, that are visiting your donation page. And that's typically the larger number here. And then some of those people then move down the funnel and they start to read on the page and start to engage. And then they read all the way to the form, and then they start to pull out their credit card and enter their name and choose their gift amount and put their credit card info in the fields. And then ultimately they complete the donation. And so you're moving from the top to the bottom of the funnel. And when we look at things through the funnel, we tend to look at these metrics like 17% and say, yay, look, we have a clear way for someone to get to the page and ultimately give a gift. But it might be more helpful for us to actually look at the inverse of this metric, which a 17% donation rate or conversion rate is actually an 83% failure rate. What happened to the 83% of other people that didn't make it to the bottom of the funnel? Nothing was actually organically, naturally pulling them down the funnel. There's no gravity at work to help these people. It's actually a lot of work to say yes at every single step and ultimately give. And so the funnel might actually be a broken analogy. Again, using a funnel, it reminds me of making a cup of coffee in the morning. I'm kind of a coffee snob, so I'm making like a pour over coffee, and you need gravity to pull the water down through the grounds of the funnel and lead to the ultimate outcome, which is a nice cup of coffee, or in our case, a donation. But this doesn't work in our case because, again, it's a lot of work for someone to say yes at every single step. They're not naturally being pulled down our funnel. We need to flip it on its head, and when you flip it on its head, it looks a little bit more like a mountain. So we call this the donor mountain, and just for the sake of the analogy, we'll unpack it here for a moment. Your donor is at the very bottom. Everyone starts here, getting their hands warm around a little fire, getting ready for their big climb up the donor mountain all the way to the top, which is your goal to get them to donate. And they have to say yes at all these different decision points along the way. So they may be saying things like this: should I open the email that you sent me, yes or no? If I say yes, I go on to step 2. If I say no, well, I go back to the bottom and I'm gone. Should I click the link in the email that you sent me? Should I read the copy that's on the page? Should I ultimately pull out my credit card and start filling out the info in these donation fields and then ultimately give my gift? And what I want you to understand, kind of more than anything that we're going to go over today, is that you as the fundraiser, you as the marketer, you as the communicator in this case, you are the Sherpa. You know the path of least resistance to get them from the bottom to the top. It's your job to be their guide and show them the opportunity of impact that they can make with their gift and help them to say yes at every single step so they keep working their way to the top. So this is you right here. Whether you remember this or not, this is you right here, putting all the weight on your back and helping someone climb the mountain. Now, we've done a lot of research about what are nonprofits actually doing to try to raise more money online. Specifically, in this case, what do donation pages look like overall? We've run a lot of different experimentation and testing to try to decode what actually works to lead to greater conversions on these pages. We can take that and we can go look at the state of the industry and see, are nonprofits applying proven, not best practices, but proven tactics that we've learned through testing and optimization that can lead to greater giving. And so applying a bit of a scoring model here, what we found across every single vertical, the median score for a donation page on a scale of 0 to 100 is a 57. Now, if you remember back to your days in school, that's basically an F. So that's not great, but it is good news, because if I told you our conversion rates were 17%, but everybody's scoring like a 90 or above, then there's not that much room for improvement. But what this should say to you is that there's a tremendous opportunity even just based on things we have already learned to date that can lead to greater giving on our pages. So tremendous opportunity for improvement. And this isn't just for like the big organizations with big budgets. It's easy to assume that when you have more donations and more revenue and more sophistication and more staff, well, your donation page and donation experience probably gets better. That's only a little bit true. And you can see that on this chart. Smaller organizations like 0 to 10 million certainly have a little bit more room for improvement compared to like the big guys, if you will. But anywhere from 100 million plus, they're all kind of the same. Having more money, bigger budgets, more people, more sophistication doesn't necessarily lead to a better donation experience. So collectively, no matter where you're at in terms of vertical or size or number of staff, number of employees, there's lots of opportunity for growth. And I hopefully am going to give you 5 really clear things that you can do today to implement on your pages to lead to greater conversions. That's really our goal by the end of this session, is to help you craft a main donation page that connects with the motivations of your potential donors and ultimately leads to green arrows and leads to more giving. At Next After, this is what we do primarily. We help nonprofits grow their digital fundraising. We do that in 3 main ways. We're a research lab where we go conduct research about the state of the industry, as we've looked at. We run a lot of A/B testing and experimentation to decode exactly what works to grow giving. We do a lot of that work through our digital first agency, where we're working with about 40 plus organizations day in and day out to help grow their donation programs, fundraising programs. And then ultimately, everything we learn from research, from experimentation, from work like in the weeds with clients, with organizations, we turn it into training just like this to equip you and equip the industry at large with what we're learning works to grow giving. To date, this slide is actually already out of date, even though I just took the screenshot not long ago. We have over 3,700 online fundraising experiments that we've conducted over the past 7 years or so, and we're on a path to try to get to 25,000. That's really our goal over the next 10 years, trying to decode what actually works. And as we filter those experiments down to just the main donation page, there's a lot of different variables and different elements that we've isolated and figured out. These are some things you should absolutely do or test on your page. These are some things that you absolutely should not try on your page that might actually lead to decreases in conversion and decreases in giving. And we have a whole template with 19 plus different elements tested and proven to increase performance on your page. We do not have time today to break down all 19 of these different elements. So I'm going to try to simplify this for you. We're going to look at 5 key areas. You can see them on your screen here, where we often fail our donors, and a few key principles around each one with some specific test ideas that you can go implement to try to see an increase in performance. So let's dive right into the main message. This is one of the biggest levers that we can pull on our page. How do we craft our messaging and our value proposition in order to lead to greater giving? So here's idea concept number 1 that I want you to keep in mind. We'll review these at the end too, but keep this in mind. I want you to make your main message on your page as inclusive as possible. And when I say that, I don't mean that we want our message to be inclusive of every single person on planet Earth. No matter who comes to your page, it's going to make them feel good that they donate. I want you to have your ideal donor in mind and make your messaging as inclusive to your ideal donors as possible. We're not trying to reach the whole globe. We're trying to reach people that are likely to give to you. Let's unpack this a little bit. So my good friend John Powell came up with this analogy. I think it's a really good one. The messaging on your main donation page specifically should be like a fortune cookie, where you're eating your meal, you're waiting on opening your fortune cookie, you get to the end, you crack it open, you have a little message and it feels relevant to you, even though you know it's been mass produced and shoved in that cookie and it's probably been sitting on a shelf for years, but it feels relevant to you and personal to you. You can read your own sort of like life story into it. Let me show you one example though, that I don't know if this has happened to you, but imagine you're getting ready to open your fortune cookie. You crack it open, excited for your message and maybe your lucky numbers or something like that, and there's nothing in it. What the heck? What a disappointment. And this is exactly what happens on pages like this, where you come to a donation page and it has no information on it whatsoever. I came here to find out more about giving, and all you have is a form for me to make a transaction? Well, that leaves a lot to be desired. I'm trying to figure out, is this the best place for me to make an impact that I care about with my money and with my donations. We have to have something. We have to have a message. And when you have a message, what should it be? Here's an example, actually from like a Reddit thread. It's kind of funny. It says, my wife is 24 weeks pregnant today. This is what her fortune cookie had to say. A short stranger will soon enter your life with blessings to share. Doesn't that feel super relevant to this person who posted this on Reddit? I'm sure it felt super relevant to the moment they're about to have a baby. That's like a short person that I've never met. It's a short stranger, and they're going to have tons of blessings because they're my child, and I'm going to watch them grow up, and I'll have blessings for their whole life. But this also could be relevant to me, and my wife is not 24 weeks pregnant, but I could leave the office today and I could meet someone who's just shorter than me, and we could become great friends. I don't know. I can read my own story into this as well, and you probably can too. Thank you, Katie and Michelle, for the shout outs about being funny. Y'all are funny. Let's keep rolling. Even though these things are just mass produced over and over and over, and again, they probably sit on a shelf for years before you ever see them. They're not for you, but they make you feel like they're for you. And that's what we want to do on our pages. We need to keep our message broad enough to be all-encompassing to your ideal donors. We don't want to get too in the weeds about specific programs or specific funds because you don't know the motivation of the person that's on the page necessarily. If you send someone to a specific donation page from a specific email or a specific ad, then you can control the messaging a little bit more. But on the main donation page, you have lots of different traffic coming in with a variety of motivations that you need to be inclusive of. I want to show you one experiment example around this. This is from Harvest Ministries. They're a ministry based out in the California area, Southern California. And they ran this initial experiment around value proposition on their donation page. And quite honestly, when we ran this experiment and saw this experiment run initially, I would have thought that version B probably would lead to a more significant outcome in terms of performance and donations. Oftentimes, what we see is just longer copy tends to beat out shorter copy because you unpack the value proposition even more. But here's how these two pages compare. Version A and version B, the headlines are pretty different, basically focus on the same thing, but written differently, different lengths. You move into the narrative of the copy. When you donate to Harvest, you join a team committed to knowing God and making him known. That's version A. Version B starts to dive into a narrative, which is a little bit different. Still aligned with their main value proposition, but now it's getting into a specific narrative. Version A then bullet points out, here's all the different things that we do at this ministry to try to impact our ultimate goal. Or version B continues down this line of sort of story-driven narrative about a specific aspect of their organization. And you get down to the bottom and it kind of tells the whole story here. Version A then asks for a donation related to the whole organization. How do you basically pitch in and contribute to this organization to contribute to this cause? Version B then asks for a donation that feels a lot more specific. Your gift to Harvest Ministries will help Pastor Greg continue to communicate in these ways that we've talked about. Version A is broad and encompassing of all the different programs going on at the organization. Version B is focused around a specific aspect, which might be good if you made a specific appeal about that from the get-go. But again, the main donation page, lots of different traffic coming in. So version B actually led to a 30% decrease in donations because it was too narrow. It wasn't broad and encompassing enough of the variety of motivations of people coming to the page. So that's really key point number one, is make sure that your messaging is encompassing of all those motivations that your donors bring to the table. Interestingly enough, we conducted this study about a year ago, the Global Online Fundraising Scorecard. We found looking at 630 organizations around the world, 30% of organizations had no copy on their donation page explaining why someone should give at all. So if you are going to do one thing after this webinar, I would encourage you to do this. Make sure that you have copy on your page, no matter how long it is, have something that explains why someone should give. We can't assume someone is fully motivated to give until they've actually completed the donation. And one more thing about this too. Do not, for any reason, no matter what, no matter where, no matter who you're with or where you're going, for any reason, use a video to communicate your value proposition. There's a quick little Michael Scott plug for you Office fans that are out there. But here's why I say don't use a video. because this is an experiment we've run time and time again, and we see almost the same exact result every time. Version A uses a great video to talk about why you should give to this organization. All the value proposition is compacted in this video. I saw a question about what really is the value proposition. The way we define that is answering this question of why should I give to you rather than to some other organization, or maybe not even at all. It's unpacking the why. In short, we have a whole course about it. You can dive into that later. But the value proposition in this case is all packaged up in this video in version A. In version B, they took a bit of a different approach. They took the same narrative that's in the video, but they unpacked it with text or with copy on the page so someone can actually read about the impact they can make. And do you want to vote? I mean, I told you which one is going to win already, so I won't have you vote in this case. But I'll have you jump in the chat and let me know, how much of an increase do you think version B is going to lead to? 5% increase in donations, 10% increase, 50% increase? Jump in the chat. Julie says 50. Jen says 50. Bob says he can read faster than he can watch, and I agree. Katie says 200. Wow, okay, that's big. So anywhere between like 10, 20, and all the way up to 200. Anyone want to go 300? 300? Going once? I would do like an auction voice, but I can't be an auctioneer. Here we go. I'll show you the answer. I won't leave you hanging. 527% increase in donations by taking that video and turning it into copy on the page. And this is not the only experiment that has led to that dramatic of an increase in donations when moving from video to copy. So do not put your value proposition just in a video on your page. Get rid of that thing, use copy. We can unpack that more at a later date, but that's what we find over and over and over and over and over again. Holy cow is right, Sally. Holy cow. Let's jump into the design of your template. Key principle number 2 that I want you to keep in mind. Make your message inclusive without distracting people or misdirecting people in the process. And I know you're not going out of your way to distract people or misdirect people, but we have to keep in mind what's happening in the template and what's happening in the mind of the donor. So we'll look at this fun little example. How many of you would have this chair in your home, and if somebody comes over to visit to have a drink or share dinner or sit around a coffee table and chat, you'd invite them to have a seat in this nice comfy chair that's right here in our living room? Probably not you. I wouldn't do that. You don't really sit in this chair. It looks nice. It's got a specific intention, which is basically to be some kind of like modern art piece. But you wouldn't invite someone to sit in this chair. Design serves a purpose, and design serves an intention. And in our case of a donation page, we don't want it to just look nice or look cool or look interesting. We're trying to facilitate a conversation. And so we have to be intentional with our design. So one aspect of that is just the navigation on your page. In version A of this experiment, they have the navigation at the top. You've got all these other things that you can do on the donation page. But I already clicked the donate button and said I wanted to donate. But now you've put this bridge to well-being. You've put this link to policies impacting me. You've put this link to other events or to the blog. You've got social media icons. These are things that are all being prioritized above the donation page that's down below. So version B, they removed all the primary navigation, and it led to a 195% increase in donations. There were fewer distractions in the process. They're getting rid of some of these template elements because they aren't facilitating the conversation in a meaningful way. They're distracting. Here's another larger experiment, version A versus version B. You see some pretty clear differences just right off the top. The copy is the same here, but the layout of the page is very different. And there's some subtle things that are happening, and I'll highlight some of those for you. Here's, the full page, side by side. You can see everything. I want to highlight a couple of things right here at the top. Instead of asking someone to choose what frequency of a gift they want to make after they've selected their donation amount, they flip the order. So version A asks you, if I can scroll back up, version A actually asks you to choose how much do you want to give before they ask you to choose monthly or one time, which could be confusing. If I choose the amount, I have a certain expectation of, is this a monthly or one-time gift in my head? But then you ask me to choose the type down below, and I might be thrown off. There might be a point of friction, a point of confusion. So we put that choice first. Then secondly, then you have your different options that are variable based on if you've chosen a monthly or one-time donation, trying to order the thought sequence in the right way. And then down below, you've got all your billing information. And there's a few things happening here. One of them is that we're using more of the horizontal space on the form to group similar fields. So you see the first name and last name are now on the same line. You see that city and state are on the same line. Zip and phone are on the same line. We're on the left in version A, everything's stacked on top of itself. We've also eliminated some fields that only ask for the required information. But we're trying to be intentional with the design to limit confusion, to limit frustration, and limit friction in order to lead to a donation. One other thing that changed is they had these little credibility indicators right here, way up high on the page. We wondered, can we put these things down below where someone might be actually really concerned about, can I trust this organization? Just right when they're about to click that donate button. So we put them right by the donate button. All this together, what they saw was a 65% increase in donations. And so I would encourage you with the layouts of your page to use this sort of vertical top to bottom approach where you've got copy on top of the page. Someone can read about why they should give. You give them a clear call to action and then move them into the donation process. If you put a form right next to copy, you can't really control where their eye is going to go and what information they're processing at which time. We want to order the conversation in a logical way. Jen asked this question, any impact that the image or photo on the donation page made? We removed that image in this case. We can talk about imagery at some other time and dive deeper, but the short of it is, imagery can be really powerful. People often say an image is worth 1,000 words, but how do you know that they're the right words? How do you know the ones that are in your head when you look at the image are the same ones that are in your donor's head? You can't really control that experience. And how do you know it's actually motivating someone in the right direction? And so images can be really complicated and really tricky. They can be really valuable if it's the right image. So we have to test them if you're going to use images. Here's another example just about kind of usability on the form. Version A uses these radio buttons, which are really hard to click on your phone when it's like this tiny and you can't even see the button. And so you're just mashing them until you get the right one. Version B has these bigger buttons where it's really easy to click and you know exactly which one you're clicking and it's less frustrating. And in this case led to a 63% increase in donations. So even those little design features can make a tremendous difference and impact. One thing to know, one thing to take away, remove all links on your pages that are going to distract someone from the ultimate goal, which is to donate. So do this today. Go look at your page, see what's distracting someone, what's leading someone away from the donation process, and go get rid of that or make plans to get rid of it. Let's talk about donation selection, or the gift array, in other words. We'll spend a little bit of time here. I want you to avoid appearing too transactional with your gift arrays, with your messaging, with your donation selection. And we'll look at some examples. Version A and version B here. This is another one of those where I would assume normally version B actually has some extra copy about why you should choose a higher gift amount. So wouldn't you think that's going to be the better option? But that's not exactly what happened. I want to highlight this little phrase for you. It says your gift of $100 qualifies you for this membership. For only $150 more, you can be upgraded to the Freedom Circle. This led to a 22% decrease in revenue. And I think it's because of even just the tone that I just used. Version B feels a lot less authentic and less genuine. It starts to move from a donation experience to more of this transactional upsell type of experience. It's not authentic. It's not genuine. At least it doesn't feel that way. Comes across maybe as a little bit salesy and pushy. But at this point, my mindset is also shifting when I read this copy, because I'm no longer thinking about what's the impact I'm going to make with this donation. I'm thinking about what can I get back for me when I give at a certain level? And that's a totally different mindset, a totally different way of thinking. So we want to avoid sounding and appearing like an infomercial, like Keith put in the chat. We want to avoid that sort of like salesperson pushiness, and we don't want to come across as inauthentic in our copy and our messaging. Here's another example related to the gift array, something that you might actually test. Version A uses just a standard gift array. Version B uses an open field. There's no array. It's kind of you put in exactly what you want to donate. There's no recommended options in this case. And in this case, it actually led to a 126% increase in donations. I would not go just apply this to your page today without testing it. Here's why. This type of an approach can be really effective if you have a lot of repeat donors who already know how much they gave in the past, how high of a level of giving is actually impactful and effective. For repeat and return donors, that could be really impactful to unlock a little bit more generosity. I would also try this if you have a significantly high average gift on your main donation page, or if you're just curious, you can try it. And when I say try, I really mean test it, so you would know exactly what impact it's going to lead to. This is an idea that could be impactful, but you have to test it. I see Jen asking about what about including the other as a button? I would certainly do that. Always give that option for someone to give an other amount than what's on the gift array. But in this case, they have the gift array totally gone and only that other option. One thing, make sure that any additional incentives on your page, whether it's to upgrade to a certain membership level or to get a certain premium offer, don't come across as opportunistic. And that's really tricky and really subtle. It's something you have to test into. Let's talk about the actual form fields or personal information input. We're really talking about form fields. What do you ask people to give you when they are making a donation? The key principle here, the overarching idea is you want to minimize the perceived input. Let's talk about perception for a moment. You remember back at like the height of the pandemic, when we had to sit in these super long lines just to get a COVID test and figure out if you had a cold or if you had COVID, you need to isolate for like 2 weeks. You would sit in these lines forever. And they got faster over time, but these are long lines. And then when vaccines rolled out, we kind of had the same thing. You're sitting in these super long lines waiting for, at least that's how it was here for us, sitting in this long line to go get your vaccine shot and things like that. And these lines take forever. There's some really interesting science around waiting in line. Who would have thought there's a lot of interesting things about waiting in line? I'll call out a couple of highlights for you here that I think are really interesting. Number one, clock watching. When someone is waiting in line and you wait longer than 3 minutes, you typically start to multiply how long you've been waiting in line. So if you waited longer than 3 minutes, you start to think like, well, maybe I've been waiting here for like 6 minutes, but it's only been 3. And in fact, men are actually way more likely to bail out on a line than women. So women, congratulations. Y'all are far more patient than us, according to the science. So congratulations. Give me one moment, if you will. My computer's going to die and my power must not be plugged in. I'll still be here in the background talking about waiting. You can put me on the clock here for how long this takes. There we go. All right, we're good. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Let's keep rolling. Perception is your reality. So if you've been waiting in line for 3 minutes, you're starting to multiply it, you think it's been 6 minutes, that is how someone is actually experiencing the world around them. So regardless of your best intentions on a donation page, the way that your donor perceives the information on the page is their reality. So we have to put ourselves in their shoes. Let's look at some examples. Believe it or not, version A and version B are the exact same form. I'll pause for a moment so you can look, you can kind of verify, because they look different. I promise you, they're the exact same form. At least in the sense that they ask for the same information, in the same order, same required fields, same optional fields, same copy at the top, same call to action at the bottom. Everything is the same. The only difference is the perception of how much work is going to go in to actually making a donation. Version B led to a 39% increase in donations because it's grouping these common fields together. You've got first name and last name on the same line. You've got city, state, and zip code all on the same line. You've got email and preferred phone all on the same line. They're using some of the horizontal space on the form to reduce the perception of how much work has to go into making a donation. 39% increase, all because of what's happening in someone's brain, which is pretty remarkable. This is something we call field layout friction, how the layout might impact someone's perception of work. Here's another example. You can probably see the difference right off the bat here. Version A does not ask for a phone. Version B requires a cell phone, and that led to a 50% decrease in revenue. So just adding one more required field can make a dramatic difference, especially something like a phone, where if you're requiring it, it really feels like you're going to call me and I don't want you to call me. You can make it optional, and people who want to give you their phone number, want to hear from you, are going to give it to you. And you can make those donor thank you calls and all that stuff to follow up without actually impacting or hurting your conversion rates. But if the moment you require that phone field, it can really dramatically impact conversion rates in a negative way. This is something we call field number friction. The more fields you have on a page, the more likely you are to lose some people along the way. Here's another interesting one. If you look at version A, this is actually a gift verification page. So you've already filled out the form, put in all your info, hit donate, you come to this page and it looks like you're done. However, if you squint, it has these little process donation buttons, both at the top and at the bottom. You're supposed to verify that all your info is correct on this page before the transaction actually takes place. But they wondered, is this actually standing in the way? And so they tested just removing the verification step altogether, processing the transaction the moment somebody hits the donate button the first time. And what they saw was that this verification step, although it had the best of intentions to make sure all the info was right and all that stuff, was keeping them from raising 176 more % more donations on this page. So be careful about things like adding extra steps along the way that may not be perceived as necessary. This is something we call steps friction. Interestingly enough, again, as we're doing this research to take the pulse of the industry, how many pages does it take to complete your donation? 30% of nonprofits had 3 or more steps required to complete a donation. And every time you have an additional step, especially an additional page load, you're going to lose people at every single step. So I'd encourage you to make sure to isolate or reduce your donation experience down to a single page. And maybe at the end, we can talk more about some of those like giving widgets versus single page donation forms and things like that. But here's one thing to keep in mind related to form fields. Remove everything that's not necessary. And I put this little note in here because I've seen it a lot often. I'm looking at you, the required title field. If you require a Mr., a Mrs., a doctor, a corporal, a sergeant, or whatever the title is, that could be a pretty common thing that can stand in the way of some conversions. Last section, and then we'll wrap up here. The supporting message. When you get towards the bottom of your donation page, how do you just kind of wrap everything up? How do you support your message, alongside the donation form? There's a lot of different things that you can try, but what I want you to keep in mind is how proximity can affect interpretation. I want you to support your primary message in the right proximity. And I'll give you just a fun little example to think about and ponder for a moment. Is this an example of poor placement? I think it might be. Maybe the $2 craps billboard was put in after the McDonald's and they thought it was funny or would get more attention. I don't think McDonald's probably appreciates the placement of this billboard, but it could be intentional. Maybe it's not poor placement. Here's another one. What commonly runs through your brain when you see the letters WTF? Please don't put it in the chat. Just keep it in your brain. But it's probably worship, teaching, and friends. Is that right? That's probably what went through your head. This might not be the best placement here. I want you to keep this kind of stuff in mind as you think about your donation pages as well, specifically as it relates, in this case, to security on the page. I am assuming, I'm going to operate on the assumption that your donation pages are secure. Someone can make a secure transaction and trust you with their credit card information on your form. But do they know that? That's really the core question. Version A, the credit card fields look exactly like every other field on the page. Version B, it is equally as secure as version A, but they added a little gray box behind it, behind the credit card info. They added a little PNG icon of a padlock that does not increase security, but it does tell someone when you enter your information, it is secure. It's a little visual reminder to try to reduce some of the anxiety placed in the right spot on the page. Because you know that they could go up to the URL and they could see the little padlock and like the HTTPS and know that it's secure. Sometimes this stuff falls down in the footer, but we need to put it in the proper proximity to where the alarm bells start to go off. When I enter my credit card information, I get a little bit concerned. Can I trust you? Is my information going to get lost or stolen? Oh, you put a padlock icon on this page. Now I feel great. And this actually led to a 9.5% increase in donations. You can do this too. It's fairly simple to do. But putting that messaging in the right proximity can lead to this pretty dramatic increase in donations comparatively to the amount of work that goes in for it. Here's another example. Version A and version B, same page, same form, same everything, except for this little message down below. This is one of the most underutilized spaces on a donation page or on a landing page, which is right below the button. But think about this for a moment. I said it earlier. When someone has filled out all the information on your form and they are about to donate, this is the point of no return. Once I click this button, assuming the form works, which is not a given, test your forms, everyone. But assuming the form works, when I click this donate button, you have all of my information. The transaction is going to go through. You're going to have my $70. Do I trust that you're actually going to hold on to that information and not sell it? Do I trust that you're going to make the impact you told me that you can make with my gift? Do I trust you as an organization? That's when all the alarm bells are going off and causing me to step back and think, do I really want to do this? But you can alleviate some of this concern with a little message like this. I'll read it for you. It says, your tax-deductible donation to CaringBridge powers our nonprofit service of providing safe, protected websites for no charge. Every 7 minutes, a new site is created, along with a new compassionate community to surround the individual on their health journey. It's reinforcing everything that had come before, trying to address these points of anxiety, and it led to a 31% increase in donations, which is pretty remarkable, just by adding 2 sentences a copy under the button. So one thing to keep in mind, make sure your payment info looks and feels secure. And again, that little hack, just add a little padlock icon right by that information to visually remind people, it's okay, you can put your information in here. It's secure. And that's it, we made it through all the top 5 things. I want to review those key principles real quick to make sure they stick. So let's review. Number 1, related to your main message, make it as inclusive as possible. Think about the fortune cookie. Again, you're not trying to reach the whole world, just your ideal donors, and address all the varying motivations that might be brought to your main donation page. With your template design, you don't want to distract people. Remove all those other links that go to other things besides donating. Lead them through a logical conversation down to the ultimate decision of donating. Donation selection, avoid appearing too transactional. Give them options. If you want to test that open field option, you can do that too, but avoid appearing overly transactional. Keep them focused on the impact at hand. Personal information or form fields, minimize the perceived amount of input, both by using some of that horizontal space and only asking for things that are necessary. And then finally, support your message in the right and proper proximity, understanding that that little padlock makes an impact at the credit card fields, but not as much of an impact if it's at the top of the page. So understand where you put things on your page impacts how people perceive them. Here's a quick guide for you if you want to keep a lot of these different elements in mind the next time you're working on your main donation page, plus some additional ones as well. You can scan that QR code, or you can go to that URL you see on your screen and grab this main donation page template with 19 different elements that you can test on your page. And we can share that link out as well. And then we actually have like a little video. It's like 30 seconds, so hang with us, and then we'll have some Q&A, I believe, for a few minutes. But about the Nonprofit Innovation and Optimization Summit. This is a conference we put on as Next After. This is the 7th year for it, which is wild. But it's coming up at the end of September in Kansas City, Missouri. It's 2 full days of speakers and networking and parties and lots of fun stuff. We bring in a lot of speakers from the for-profit world who have innovative ideas that we think can be really transformational in our space, in the nonprofit space, in the fundraising space. So I'd love for you to join. I'd love for you to attend. Katie's putting this in the chat too. I think it's going to pop up on your screen here in a moment. You can actually save $450 because you've attended this webinar. So thanks to Katie and Kara and the whole Nonprofit Hub team. If you use the code ICNPH22, maybe screenshot that thing so you remember it. You can add that code in your checkout and save $450 on your ticket. So make sure you do that right away. And then I believe we do have a short little video. Katie or Kara, are we able to share that? And you're going to find out why I identify as the Tin Man. So I'd love to see you at NEO Summit. You can get your ticket at niosummit.com. You can currently see the full Scarecrow video at the website. Tin Man video is coming next week. So go check that out and then keep coming back. We'll have some more videos coming for you for the next few weeks. Yeah, it's a good question. Typically, I would say mostly no, because the typical implementation of PayPal often sends you off-site into a different, portal through PayPal to go donate. There is an implementation of it just.
And I cannot recommend this conference enough.
I'm fine.
So it was really.
But if you're sending someone off of your page to go to a different experience to go donate, you can't really control what messaging they're seeing in that process. I also felt like I took more notes at that conference. The messaging along the way is so critical. It was incredible. If you lose that ability to communicate the why throughout the process,
I also want to make sure. I know we're running out of time, but we're going to try to get through as many
maybe you've got a really good hunch as to why PayPal might be more effective for you. You can always put it to the test.
Okay,
my
so
gut,
Haley is asking, is it better to use or offer PayPal versus a form?
Because we've seen as you send people away and send people to another experience outside of your own control, it typically leads to lower conversion rates. So be careful with PayPal. That's a great point. Can I make one more comment on that too? I mean, some organizations have like an integrated like login system, and we've seen that lead to lowered conversions oftentimes, where you force someone to log in even outside of PayPal, but in your own kind of controlled experience. So I'd be careful with that. One of the times where we've seen that actually be effective, if someone has that donor login, is to facilitate like a one-click donation experience. That might be something to test into. That's another level of sophistication though.
One other huge caution with PayPal, one of the organizations I volunteer with uses it. It asks you to log in before it asks you
that's a fantastic one. I would absolutely have those. I would work to have those. I know it takes sometimes a lot of effort or finding the right tool to find one that can support that in a way that makes sense and is easy to use. I would also, as you're implementing that, test it, because it wouldn't be too hard to test basically, here's my old experience versus my new experience, and see how much of an impact it really makes, just to be sure that you know exactly what's going on and that it's not somehow hindering the primary experience. But certainly on a mobile device, having those types of checkout options would make the process more friction-free. But I would test it so you know exactly the impact it's having. Then you can go back to your boss and say, hey, I implemented this thing that led to a
kind of along those lines, what about the addition of e-wallets like Google or Apple Pay?
Right. Yes, I do have preferred sites. However, we typically tend to be pretty agnostic in terms of tools that people use, because we have to work in all sorts of tools, and you don't always have full control of your full tech stack. And so I'm hopeful that the majority of these different ideas you can actually implement inside of your current tool. We certainly have some recommendations. One of our preferred preferred donation page providers is iDonate. So you can check them out. They're rolling out an update to their tool that actually starts to integrate A/B testing directly, natively into the platform, as well as engineering some of our, like this template that we've walked through today, engineering that template as an option for you to basically select, plug your info in, and then you have all these different great things we've tested into already baked into your page. So that's one that I would consider checking out as kind of a surefire solution to make sure these things get implemented and that you can continue to test on them. Yeah, we chatted about it just briefly, but I'll touch on it again because I do think it's important. It's a really common question. And this question comes up both on donation pages and in things like emails. We often say is like a picture is worth 1,000 words. It's a very common refrain. I'm certain you've heard a million times. But the question is, like, what are those words, and how do you know that they're the right ones, and how do you know that Katie and I aren't perceiving what an image means in a totally different way? So you have to be really careful with
Kara,
imagery.
if you haven't already,
if you have a really good hypothesis as to why a certain image is going to add more
so we talked about videos
on
donation pages, but Jen wants to know about the impact of using
I would put it to the test. I would not assume that it works. I would put it to
using an image.
the test,
I'm
because we
her
often
question. Image
see
or photo.
Images actually lead to a pretty dramatic decrease in conversions because you just don't know how someone's really perceiving the meaning of it. Yeah, so in the A/B testing world, the conversion rate optimization world, we're being really intentional in how we implement these experiments to try to make sure that the division of traffic is truly random, but also proportional. So we're not skewing, like version A has a bunch of repeat recurring donors and version B has a bunch of people who have never given before, because that could totally throw off your conversion metrics and your validity of your experiment. We're trying to make sure that every version of these experiments has a somewhat equal amount of sample size. There's some great tools out there. Optimizely has one to really calculate what's the sample size that you need.
So this is a brilliant question from Haley.
In order to validate an experiment and make sure that you have enough people that have seen it and converted to statistically say that, yes, we're going to see this type of response ongoing. There's also some great tools out there that just make this process easy, so you don't have to A, be a statistician, or B, be a super sharp web developer to go implement this stuff. Google Optimize is a free tool that is probably the primary tool for 95% of use cases, because it lets you run quite a lot of different experiments at once. Does so really effectively, integrates into Google Analytics if you have that set up, so you can pull in conversion data that way. So I would check out Google Optimize if you're looking at running experiments on your page and don't have a native testing tool. That's what we use all the time, both internally for Next After, as well as a lot of the different clients that we work with. Yeah, it's a great question. So what I would say to that is there's really two kind of categories that your A/B test might fall into. One of them would be more of these kind of universal elements, just about how people process information, and gets into sort of human psychology and science around decision making and behaviors. A lot of that relates back to like user experience. That's really going to apply across a lot of different donor segments and ages and demographics.
Okay,
at the same time, there's also experiments and tests and ideas that you can run that are going to be really contextual to you, to your organization, to your cause, maybe to specific donor segments, to specific demographics. Most of those things are going to relate directly to messaging. And so you do have to keep that in mind, knowing who your audience is, what your goals are, who you're targeting. And we have a tool called Winston Knows that we actually built for ourselves to make our lives easier as we're running all sorts of testing and experimentation. That integrates into Google Optimize. So if you're using that, you can also integrate it in Winston. And it has some really cool tools to easily pull out, based on a lot of these different audiences that you might be identifying in Google Analytics, how does the performance vary through all these different segments, whether it's based on device or based on channel, based on demographics. You can split out things like that. So we are trying to look at how does this impact all these different donor segments. They're done on both desktop and mobile. Basically, every experiment that we went through today was primarily focused on desktop. We looked at all desktop examples, but it's being run across all devices, in a responsive way. There are certainly experiments, as we've been trying to dive a little bit deeper into like mobile experiments over the past year or so, where there's changes you might make that really impact desktop in a positive way, but really hurt mobile. Or sometimes you might be confused why one thing actually, or you had a great test idea, but it doesn't actually lead to a major difference in performance. But when you drill into the different channels and you drill into the different device sizes, you may find that it hurt things on desktop and increased things on mobile, and then it all kind of came out in the wash.
About this too.
And so you might actually find that there's a particular experience that's really good for mobile, but we need to rethink how we do desktop. So it does get pretty nuanced and pretty challenging, depending on the level of testing that you're doing. all these things that we looked at today, typically what we do when you scale down to a mobile device, if you're looking at the template we've walked through, is you're still keeping everything in the same order. You're keeping headline at the top, you're keeping all the copy, any supporting content like testimonials or reviews or things like that that might typically sit off to the right side of the page. You just wrap those down below the form because they're not primary content, they're supporting content. But then you move through that logical kind of thought sequence from headline to copy to form and then supporting content underneath. Yes, for sure. Looking forward to that. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate your time. Hopefully this is helpful for you.
Very good. Nathan, another stellar webinar. Thank you so much. I know we didn't get through every question, and I'm sorry about that, but I want to be respectful of Nathan's time as well as all of yours. Again, I would really encourage you to attend the NIO Summit. I'll be there. I would love to connect in person with some audience members, so that would be cool. And Nathan, I think you're coming back to join us for some more webinars in the months to come, so watch for that.